Alright, this is going to be a response to one of David Kretzman's videos on, it's called Austrian Economics and the Liberty Movement. Alright, well, so David, this happens to be a subject that I'm very interested in and that I know a little bit about. I think it's neat that you're making videos for Ron Paul and all that, and that's fine. But a lot of what is said in this video, I think, seems to be more like analogy than factual truth. So, just in the interest of truth, I would like to post a video response. That's the only point of this. Overall, I agree with your overall message, big government's bad and all that, because I'm a libertarian. But there's just some things that I heard that were not completely accurate. So I wrote them down on my note card here, and I'll just kind of go through them one by one. When you described Keynesianism, you said that it's the idea that the more you tax, borrow, and spend, that the better or stronger the economy will be. Not true. Keynesianism says that the more you borrow and spend, primarily spend, it looks at total spending. That whether it's from the private sector or the government sector, it doesn't really matter in the Keynesian framework, that this will boost the economy, but it also says that it'll increase inflation. And of course, I think every economist would agree that increases in total spending will increase inflation, all else held constant. But it looks at taxes as actually more of a deflationary type of tool, so it'll lower the price level by reducing demand. In the real world, of course, that's not completely clear, but I do believe studies have shown that taxes do tend to reduce economic growth and stuff like that. But in terms of like the price level and stuff, that is actually unclear, because when the government taxes, of course, it doesn't just sit on that money, it spends it. But anyways, also Keynesianism is not the same as corporatism. You could have Keynesian policies that are also corporatist. You could have Keynesian policies that are not corporatist. So if you just spend a whole bunch on social safety nets or whatever, anytime the economy is in a slump, that would follow Keynesian prescriptions, but it wouldn't be corporatist. I'm not saying those things are good or whatever. I'm just saying that's still Keynesianism. So Keynesianism, corporatism is not exactly the same thing. But some people have referred to what we have in the U.S. or whatever we've experienced in recent history as military Keynesianism, which of course is, whenever the economy is in a slump, the government spends even more. Of course, Keynes said that when you're in inflation, you spend less, and when you're in a slump, you spend more. The government just spends more and more all the time. But of course, one of the largest parts of government spending is the military. You also mentioned that Austrian economics focuses on the individual, which is of course true. They use methodological individualism, but they're not the only ones who do this. Neoclassical economists, your mainstream economics classes, they'll do that too. But of course, once you get into the macro, a lot of times some of them lose that. But not all of them. If you read, for example, I was reading my friend's intermediate macroeconomics textbook. One of the authors was Ben Bernanke, which I thought was interesting. I also found it funny that in parts of the book it actually says stuff that contradicts things that Ben Bernanke said on TV. But anyways, they talk about the microeconomic foundations for macroeconomics. So, and this is, to my understanding, though, a more recent type of development in mainstream economics. Of course, the acknowledgement that macroeconomic phenomena are just, the result of microeconomic phenomena, right? The decision making of individuals and how all of the individuals interact together, and how that produces larger effects on the economy as a whole. Let's see, what else? Oh yeah, another thing, you said that Austrian economics is free market economics. Not necessarily true. A lot of Austrians, because a lot of them happen to be libertarian, And that's because Murray Rothbard was a very large figure in Austrian economics. So was Mises, and both of them were libertarians, and that's why a lot of Austrian economists happen to be libertarians. But you don't have to be a libertarian to be an Austrian economist, and of course you don't have to be an Austrian economist to be a libertarian. For example, Jeffrey Myron is a neoclassical economist, and he's a libertarian. By the way, highly recommended, videos of Jeffrey Myron, Myron spelled M-I-R-O-N, on his clips on CNN about the war on drugs. Those are excellent. Well, anyways, Austrian economics is an analytical framework. It's a school of economic thought that focuses on theory, and it uses deductive reasoning to, flesh out its theory. It actually only uses deductive reasoning, or at least emphasizes it a whole lot, because it focuses on things that are economic laws, and so therefore when you're talking about an economic law, it has to be something that is logically necessarily true, and that's why they use deductive reasoning, because when you do that, as long as you don't have any fallacies, and as long as the theory doesn't show that there's opposing forces, then you know that you've reached an economic law, basically. When theory shows you that there are two forces acting in opposite directions, then it becomes an empirical issue, because then you have to see the magnitude of each effect. But anyways, so yeah, they do look at the functioning of a market economy, but all economics, I think, does that, or at least today, anyways. It's not like the school of thought itself is advocating free markets. It's just that a lot of Austrian economists advocate free markets, right? So science doesn't advocate anything. People advocate things. So just wanted to make that clear. What else? Oh, you also mentioned that these theories were the things that helped Ron Paul and Peter Schiff predict the current, some people say we're not in a recession anymore, but yeah, the 08 or whatever year it was, 07, 09, something like that, 08, 09, recession happened, but Austrians were not the only people to predict that, and also Austrian economics provides no way of predicting recessions, actually, because it doesn't incorporate timing, but of course, I mean, that's something that I think every model has trouble with, every school of economic thought has trouble with. You just can't really predict the timing. But the problem, of course, is a lot of Austrians have always been saying, "Oh, we're going to have a huge collapse. We're going to have a huge collapse," and then it never happens. So I mean, if you're saying, you have to realize we're always basically, the Fed's always creating inflation, and it's always expanding the money supply, basically. Well, not always, but most of the time. And so this puts the Austrians in a very peculiar place, because then they'll always be in a perpetual mode of saying, oh, we're going to have a recession. Well, if you're always saying we're going to have a recession, eventually you're going to be right. Now, the Austrian theory, I think, does accurately describe this most recent recession very well, but not all business cycles are the same. That's my opinion anyways. Another thing mentioned in the video was about markets causing inflation. Where they said markets don't cause inflation. This is hard. I'm not sure whether I should say that's false or not, because the way most mainstream economists define it, anyways, is not the same way Austrians define it. A lot of Austrians define inflation as any increase in the money supply, which I think is silly. Of course, Guido Holzmann mentions that only under a fiat standard is that the case. I still disagree. I think that inflation is any expansion of the money supply above the demand to hold money. Of course, the problem is the Fed really can't measure the demand to hold money, at least not like in real time. They can always look back and then say, oh, this was people's demand to hold money, right? But then by then it's too late, and so they can't really craft their policy properly. And this kind of goes, in a way, to the knowledge problem, I guess you could say, that Hayek talked about. But yeah, even in a free market, suppose you have a large increase in the quantity of the money, whatever you're using as money, say gold, then yeah, that would cause prices to rise. Another thing would be that if there's a large negative supply shock, that reduces, the output of the whole economy. You have the same amount of money in the economy, but output is lowered, and so prices will rise because you have the same amount of money chasing fewer goods. But of course, I would definitely agree that the dominant effect is the government, because basically the rate of increase in the money supply easily outstrips any other effects that happen in the real world to increase the price level. Another thing I just want to mention is that some people do believe government policy can improve things. Of course, I disagree with them, and it's clear that you do as well. Or I don't know, I'm not making a blanket statement. I'm just saying, like, in general, right? I'm not saying when it comes to everything. Let's see. I'm looking at my notes here. Okay. Another thing is, you mentioned to return to a true free market, we need to abolish the Fed. And that would, take us back to a free market. That is not the only thing that is required. We actually need a lot more than that. And you could have a relatively free market even without getting rid of the Fed. You could just reform it. I won't get into how to reform it here, because there's different ways. But yeah, things like lowering taxes, especially lowering regulations, lowering the pace at which new regulations are created, also would greatly reduce uncertainty in the economy and would allow us to get back on our feet, basically. At least that's something that I'm saying right now. Okay. Are you talking about... I forgot exactly what was mentioned here about capitalism. I just remember, because I have in my notes to mention this, that capitalism is simply the private ownership of the means of production, which is capital goods. And is a economic system that is characterized by capital accumulation. So, yeah. Oh, I think this was talking about the Ron Paul quote at the end. And so, you can have capitalism, right, with a central bank, and we do. And there's various ways to have that capitalism. Just going by the definition, it's obvious that, there's different kinds or varying degrees and stuff like that. You can still have savings and people saving money with the central bank. Right now, it's very difficult because the Fed has interest rates so low that they're below the rate of inflation, and so we have negative real interest rates, which means they're paying people to borrow, and so therefore there's not as much savings, which is bad. And what else? What else do I want to say? Oh, yeah. Again, I felt, a lot of good stuff was in the video, but a lot of it seemed like it was either analogies or it was maybe not completely accurate. Another thing at the end that was said, I'm not sure if it was by you or your friend, might have been your friend, that said, don't let the central bank determine your success in life or something like that. Well, central banks don't determine the success of every individual in the economy, so that's just a plain fact. They don't, most of the times anyways, they really don't bail specific companies out. What they do is they actually increase the money supply by increasing the amount of reserves that all of the banks in the banking system have, and then they make those loans to anyone who's wanting to get a loan, like a business owner or whatever, starting up a new business. So yeah, central banks don't determine each individual's success, but yeah, obviously in the most recent bailout stuff, it turns out they did basically help some banks at the expense of others. But yeah, I think that basically sums up everything I wanted to say. I'm not trying to be mean or anything, it's just that this is in the interest of truth, like I said at the beginning of the video.